Welcome, Frank Wolf.
Thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure. I couldn't do it, but I was trying to think back to before, like I knew you and only knew of you, and then slowly got to get to know you.
Yeah, we did ski trips and stuff together.
We did ski trips and stuff.
Yeah.
I always thought you were so wise and and still
not.
still do, but I was trying to think back to those. It was a while ago, like 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Who
10
knows?
at least.
10, something like that.
Way back in the day.
Yeah. Do you think you're still wise?
I've never thought of myself as being wise. So yeah. I think if you think of yourself as being wise, you're probably not wise.
That's probably it. It's like if you think you're enlightened, you got to get back in the classroom.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah. No, I don't think. I think anyone who's probably lived to a ripe old age is probably wise, just because it's a different type of wisdom. Everyone has a different type of wisdom. But if you're like an elder, say someone like my mom or something, they have a natural wisdom because they've just lived a lot of life, And so I think if you're young, it's hard to be young and wise.
Yeah.
Once you get older, then maybe every year I get a bit wiser.
You must be able to be old and just like not have paid attention at all the entire time.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. And I think there's something if you're like an older person, you're not necessarily wise, but if you've held on to this like childlike zest for life, that's sometimes better than wisdom, because you keep that inner child and you keep energetic. You're not jaded by all this wisdom and life weighing down on you. You're just like, life is still amazing. You're still full of wonder about it. That's kind of what I like to do. So yeah.
And like most of us are trying to achieve that, and some people probably just be it and are it, where some of us perhaps weren't that and are trying to go through the steps to do it. Because I was telling Kevin was here on the show, and we were talking about everything that he does, and you guys do a lot of similar things.
Yeah, do stuff together with Kevin as well.
Yeah, so, but it's all quite childlike.
Sure.
And he told a story about how he got into it, about how he got separated from his parents back in Montreal when he was. Have you heard that story?
I've heard the story.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool. But it's all that kind of planted the seed for him to be a leader and explore things. And then he got the vision to go to the North Pole and then the South Pole as well.
Yeah.
But you guys are just as, and we'll get into who you are and what you do. How would you describe who you are and what you do?
I think I'm a curious person, and I just try to satisfy my curiosity. So in terms of what I'm known for is probably my journeys and explorations in kind of wilderness areas. And I think the reason I do that, and the reason I don't generally tend towards things, say like Everest or even the South Pole or the North Pole, which are just these kind of almost like bucket list things that people are into. I'm really interested in like the really obscure areas of the wilderness that people aren't necessarily going to visit, and linking together big routes through these areas, because it's more mysterious and it's more real exploration. It's almost like how it used to be, and it's almost like what's around the next corner. There's a real wonder because there's no guidebook to really show you, and so you're kind of like seeing things, and having to react with your own instincts and in the moment, and there's nothing to go on but your own kind of wits and curiosity and determination. And that kind of thing is what you find in these kind of really obscure kind of areas that a lot of people aren't interested in, but I'm not interested in the kind of the bucket list things, because that's just it's almost too, you're doing that for someone else in a way, whereas these things that are you're kind of creating yourself. It's very creative. I look at it almost like art. If you're weaving together a route, you have a start point and a finish point. Everything in between is kind of a beautiful mystery, and to kind of turn that into reality is kind of where the creation part happens. Cool. So the book, like lines on the map, each one of those lines is like, for me, it's like a work of art. In my mind, I can visually put myself along anywhere in that line because I was there and I experienced it, and it was a very kind of visceral kind of moment, and it kind of stays with you forever. So so that's kind of what I think, just my curiosity and kind of excitement about exploring these kind of relatively unexplored areas. I mean, nothing's unexplored. Everything's been used functionally by indigenous people for thousands of years. They were up there hunting and fishing and doing what they needed to do, traveling and moving from their winter winter kind of villages to their summer villages, and they're doing that functionally, whereas I'm just kind of going there more as a traveler. And for me, it's very new, but I'm doing it in a different way and for a different reason than they would have been. But in the end, for me, it's a very satisfying experience and very creative. And then after that, then it also inspires me more than anything to do my writing, and I've done films about it. So in these kind of areas where I'm constantly engaged doing this expedition, it's actually when I'm most creative too, much more than just kind of sitting at home in the city, looking out the window and saying, this is pretty comfortable and nice, but comfort doesn't really pop that creative juices that I get from the trips. So, yeah.
Do you think because if you go through a remote Inuit village somewhere up north, and people they've lived there on and off for thousands of years, maybe there's people there living there now, living their life, and then you come through for a few days on a trip or an adventure, and have a totally different experience than they do.
Right.
But so what? Because you're getting a different perception of this geographical place and this whole life that exists there from a few different lenses. But like that doesn't matter much, right? You're what you're sharing when you write about it and when you make a film about it, a remote village is your perception or how you feel in that moment. But you're also, I guess, transferring some of the stories that you learn through the people that you meet there.
Yeah, definitely. Like I think like the films I've done in the past generally, and even the stories I write generally, the trip is like a vessel that kind of shows the landscape. And if there's an issue involved or whatever, or real knowledge of the land, I'll always let the people through kind of, conversations and interviews, I would always let people be the narrators of anything because they live there, they have, generational knowledge of the areas. They're always the people speaking to these kind of the stories, and I'm just there for the entertainment and to either visually or through my writing kind of paint a picture of the landscape so people kind of get an idea of what this area is. But in terms of like the kind of the unseen knowledge, which is what these people have, they kind of give that in their narration and the conversations I have with them. So because I'm more curious, I'm not curious about myself. I don't really like to hear myself talk about things, especially I'm more curious about what other people have to say. So in terms of like, that's why learning from people who live in an area and, they've been there, their fathers, their grandfathers, and so on and so forth. They passed on this generational knowledge through the way. That's much more rich and interesting as far as a storyteller to kind of share that.
Are there instances where you can see that their stories are going to not get passed on, perhaps because the population is dwindling, or books have been lost, or whatever it is? Like, because that could happen very easily.
Yeah.
Like all these stories could be lost, whether they're saved in an obscure corner of the internet or some book, maybe. But there must be a lot of occurrences like that.
Yeah. And I think I don't see it as a tragedy that stories are lost necessarily, because it's almost like I think our culture is the one that kind of documents. Indigenous cultures historically have never documented anything like writing or whatever. It's all kind of oral history, and that's kind of the telephone game. Things will evolve a little bit over time in these stories, but the base idea stays the same. But that's all kind of oral history. So that for thousands of years they would have just kind of almost unconsciously passed on these oral histories, but they never documented it or thought that if they lost it, it's not a big deal. It's just something it's a story you're telling, and then of course it's an interesting story, so it keeps getting told. But it's never, I don't think it was something that was necessarily consciously, preserved as this kind of valuable thing. It is now, I think, of course, there's more documentation, which is very important, different, but it's more like something that we want something to almost hold on to. Whereas they kind of, I think a lot of indigenous cultures, what I found as well, they're very adaptable and malleable. Like generally Inuit, which live in the Canadian North, which is more affected, say, by climate change than anything else. They're not activists up there. They're more kind of looking at the reality and adapting to it as it happens. And that's how they've kind of lived in these kind of harsh environments, because you have to be adaptable, and their natural instinct is to be adaptable. So, I think they're not so looking in the past as kind of looking at the current state of affairs, is my experience anyways.
Oh, cool. That's interesting.
So, yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned bucket lists. I was listening to another podcast this morning about that mentioned bucket lists and how this guy was taking an opposite approach to that,
Right.
different than what you described somewhat. And his whole theory was, yeah, somewhat similar to what you said. Like, we put things on there for external validation and to show others. Whereas he was like, instead of having a bucket list, like, and you're like adding, more paintbrushes to your picture
Yeah.
or whatever it may be. Think of it more, your life more as a sculpture, and you're like chipping away, and chiseling away more parts of it to, when you get to 80, you finally have this piece
Yeah.
of art that you've created. But it's, I guess, more of an internal game of chipping away things to getting to know yourself a little bit
You'll
better.
eventually become Michelangelo's David, right?
Or a version of that. So, but even though you don't like to hear yourself speak, perhaps you must have a lot of time to get to better know yourself when you're on these long trips, and you get to, because whenever you meet other people that you haven't met, especially in these remote communities, they're a mirror of how you show up as well.
Mm-hmm.
So do you find with each one of your journeys, and we're going to talk about the ones that you've done recently and the ones coming up, but do you find that you are continuing to get to know more about yourself?
I guess so. Unconsciously, I probably do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't consciously try to necessarily get to know myself, in terms of I just put myself into these experiences. And I mean, if you're on these experiences, because you're doing, say, an interesting journey, if you're doing like, a couple of 1,000 kilometers by canoe through the wilderness, and you run into some folks in the middle of, you don't meet many people along the way in these trips, but whoever you do meet is very memorable. And you think about this person probably for the rest of your life. And they probably might think about you as well, because you're kind of meeting each other in this really interesting context. And you both kind of understand, okay, you're in the middle of this remote area, I'm in the middle of this remote area, and there's not a lot of people doing this. And so you have this instant connection. Mm-hmm. And as you go along, that's just something that, naturally happens kind of out of the ether. But as far as getting to know myself, I think I know myself pretty well. Mm-hmm. So I'm not really searching so much for, I'm a simple person. I think it's not too much complex about me, but I think, and that's also part of my whole credo, I'm happiest when things are simple. So for me, it's like simplicity, strip it down to the bare bones. For me, I look at any long distance, like trip of thousands of kilometers, as like a weekend trip with more food. And what is the simplest way I should be able to get I should be able to get like a 2-month trip in the wilderness off the ground in like a week and be gone. It's got to be that simple. And that's how I try to keep it. So just super streamlined, just 1 or 2 people, or maybe just myself, and then off you go. And, all you're doing is breathing and eating and moving through space and time. It's very simple. Mm-hmm. And I think adding gear and baubles and things like that just kind of complicates things. So it's all about simplicity. And so I'm a simple person, and I'm happiest when things are simple and clear and not convoluted. I think most people don't like the jumble or mess, like mental clutter.
Some people do.
Some people do.
It,
yeah.
Right?
But for me, it's like, I'm like the opposite. It's like, just gotta, I can deal with the chaos, I guess. But in terms of like, I try to find the clear line through the chaos, but, I'm definitely about simplicity in all things. So,
and it's I think your trips are a collection of memorable moments.
Sure. Yeah.
Those are the things you're taking with you.
Yeah. Exactly. It's the memories and the experience and it's a cliche, but it's about the journey, not the destination. And it is. It's always like, when you're in the midst of the journey, I do know to kind of sometimes take a beat around and say, okay, this is now, and it's happening now, and it's like, and you try to really enjoy where you are and fully. And so when I'm on a trip, I'm all in. I'm 100% in. Mm-hmm. Like on a ski trip, I'm 100% in. The nighttime, the daytime, milk it as much as you can, because it's going to come to an end at some point. And so while you're there in this kind of magical, moment or area, just kind of completely, let yourself be absorbed by it. And that's something that I kind of, make sure I'm aware of along the way. Because sometimes you do get in this completely Zen state, and you're not aware of anything except for where you are and what you're doing and the mission at hand. But it's good sometimes to kind of step back for a moment and see that.
But that's a form of meditation.
Yeah.
Like you say, you don't meditate, but that is like kind of the definition of a waking meditation. Like mm-hmm. even in periods throughout the day, you're like, all right, well, now I'm going into work. I can be fully I'm going to take a couple breaths. I'm going into work for the
Yeah.
next 4 hours or whatever
Yeah,
it is.
yeah.
And I'm going to lose my mind in there and
Yeah.
do things, or I'm going to do a project at my computer. But then I'm going to take a breath and I'm going to go to the gym at lunch. And I'm going to be fully there. And then I'm going to come take a breath and be fully here talking for Frank for another hour and a bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's the commitment to the presence.
Yeah. And I think if you're not conscious of that commitment to the presence, that's ultimately meditation, isn't it? You know, because if you're thinking I'm meditating, well, then you're not meditating, right?
Okay, well, all right. So your book is this came out a few years ago. I remember reading it and going, wow. It's called Lines on a Map because you have this ongoing map where you put lines on it that are all relatively simple of all of your journeys. Yeah. And I was reviewing the updated one that you put on Facebook recently. And did it start with the canoe trip from St. John to so you canoed from St. John.
St. John, New Brunswick, Bay of Fundy to Vancouver.
You canoed to Vancouver.
That's right. Okay. Yeah. So that's kind of the first one. I did that in 1995. And I guess that's kind of, it got its hooks into me, and it kind of has never let go, because I really love that. Again, that experience of simplicity. You know, all you have to do is get up, basically eat, and just kind of move to the landscape, and that's it. Then camp somewhere and just kind of repeat and get into this kind of rhythm and cycle. And every day is ever changing. The landscape's ever changing. It's a different adventure every day. And that one just kept on going for 171 days. And so it just kind of became part of my life ever since then. So I just kind of made sure I needed that, at least one trip like that every year. Not that big necessarily, but, and now recent years I've done, 2, sometimes 3, depending, but, shorter trips, about a month or so. But just to get away and have that kind of experience is part of my annual cycle ever since. So, yeah.
Were you always a wilderness? Were you a wilderness kid?
I think so. Like my parents, I'm a first generation Canadian. My mom's Danish. My dad was German, and they came over kind of to have an adventure in Canada. And then they basically never left. And we would spend, several weeks when I was 6 weeks old, I was in a canoe on a lake in Ontario kind of thing. Right. So they kind of became part of me through the years. And then, we spent summers up in Northern Ontario, and I was a canoe trip guide and a tree planter in university. So I've always just really been comfortable and loved, adventure, especially in the wild, and the pristine, ancient kind of vibe and feeling you get from being in a wild place. So
what did they think of when you set off from St. John in 1995 with pointed at the West Coast?
They were just, great, go for it. My parents are always 100% supportive. They never ever directed me in any way, shape, or form what to do with my life. Never thought you have to get married, have kids, have a steady job, that work towards retirement. It was more like they just let me kind of figure my own way out, and I still am, and I think everyone is in a way, but they kind of let me kind of just follow my heart or my path, and didn't get in the way and encourage me, especially my mother. I think probably, like, she was kind of like, I'd send her like rolls of film, and she developed them as I was going across Canada. It's like pre-digital, right? Actually taking film and things like that. So she was fully into the vicariously living through my trip, and has, ever since, right? So
well, that's what's fun with the writing and the articles that you do as well. Like the rest of us can vicariously live through it without all the bugs and the sleeping in the dirt or whatever it may be, or the polar bears on the recent ones.
I think with like, I don't expect anyone else to want to do what I do. I mean, someone once asked me, don't you feel like you're just, super privileged to be, and I am privileged to do what I do, but it's not like I have any money or desire it either. It's never been for any kind of financial gain. I think if you really love to do something, I think you just find a way to do it. So it's never been anything. I don't have a trust fund. I don't have really anything to speak of as far as, like, having some backing. I kind of scrape it out, get the base amount of, sponsorship for gear and say flight coverage, anything I need to scrape away just enough to have a trip done. And once you're on a trip for 2 months, you basically don't have any costs. It's like easy living, right? You're just out there. And so it's like anything. It's like, from the outside, it seems like a really glamorous thing, but, live for a week in my shoes going upstream on a a Northwest Territories river and tell me how privileged it is, I guess, right? But it's something that I happen to love, right? Everyone just finds something that they love, and that's this strange thing of kind of moving through these kind of remote wilderness areas is something that I just happen to love. And I just kind of keep on going back to it.
Can we talk about that? Because I have thought about this for obviously quite a few moments in my mind. But like, this is I don't want to even call it a job, but this is what you do. Like, you get sponsorship.
It's my passion,
But you had a job at one point and different points.
I work, and I in order to make it happen, you do work in between. So I like just over here in Granville Island, I work in a boatyard, doing demolition of boats and painting and replacing, running gear and that sort of thing for a little place there. I just got back from a month polar bear guiding, like showing people the polar bears of Churchill for like 5 weeks. So kind of you fit work in between because everyone needs to make money, everyone needs to live and kind of keep the dream kind of going. So you kind of figure out ways to kind of find places to work that are flexible enough that you can go off and do your passion stuff as well. And so it's a bit of a balancing act, but you're always, working and making money in between. And then when you're out there, you'll make a little bit of money off of, I've sold films and I sell writing. I still write for Explore magazine, write features for them and do a blog. And so, money comes from, it's like gig work, just trickling in from all different directions to kind of make this thing happen.
So do you get stressed out about money at certain points of the year?
Not really. I think I've been living on the thin edge so long, it's just normal. So, for me, it's not like, and I have enough. I have, in terms of I don't have any kids. My partner, Shannon, of course, she has a steady job, but we still split everything as far as, finances and stuff like that. But it's like, we just make it work. And it's, I think if you love something, you just kind of make it work no matter what it is, right? Be it a family or being in a trip or being like, a business you're doing. If you love what you're doing and you're passionate about it, then you'll just make it work. Ultimately.
Do you think you're lucky that you found that you love what you're doing? And do you see a lot of people that haven't found anything that they love doing?
I think it's probably a hard thing to find too. I definitely know my happy place, which is when I'm out there on a journey, and it's like when I'm in the midst of a journey, say 30 days or 60 days, you're just I'm kind of the ideal version of myself when I'm out there. It's like I know when I'm out there, I'm doing exactly what I should be doing, and it's my perfect kind of place. But it's almost like, it's interesting, you can't be in your perfect place 365 either. You almost like this ebb and flow is needed for perspective. So if I'm out there, I'm out there and I'm fully on, and I'm my ideal self for like a month or two. But then you need this kind of period of almost like fallow in between, almost like more like a reset, relaxation, coming back to the normal world. And then that's when I kind of produce my writing and everything after the fact. And then you start to get that ideas and the fire for kind of the next one. But you need that in between, because if you were to do that perfect passion work that you're doing, say for a month, if you're doing that for 365 a year, I think it wouldn't be that way. I think it would normalize too much and it wouldn't fire you the same way. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like you need these it's almost like a mission, I call it. So you need this kind of finite start and finish area. And that in between is when you do your passion work, and you still love everything you're doing after the fact. The writing is a totally different, like, creative mindset that I enjoy, but you're in a different space as far as, like, I'm a very physical person, I think. And so if I'm physically active doing something creative, which is what I look at trips as being, that's when I'm my ideal self. But like I said, it can't be forever, because it'll just normalize and it won't be as special. So you have to kind of just break it up into bite-sized chunks throughout the year. So
Do you ever,
and that keeps it kind of fresh and alive for your whole life, I think, too, doing it that way. So
do you ever get moments on your trip where you're like, you get anxiety about the next trip or money or something, or you wish you weren't there, or you notice yourself not appreciating the wilderness that you're in or something like that, and then you ever not have fun on your trips?
I think, I mean, depends. The trips that I create myself fully, that's kind of, I'm fully there. But sometimes I'm brought on trips with other people that maybe aren't as fulfilling, but I mean, they're great too. So it's almost like I find it really hard not to have a great time on trip.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I'm sure there's always times, of course, when you're not like 100% stoked to be where you are. But whenever that happens to me, I have an instant kind of beat where I'm kind of thinking, if I wasn't doing this, what would be better than this? And I can, in that moment, I can never think of anything better. And then you kind of realize, this is exactly where I need to be right now. So, but so I think on those journeys, I never question, I never want to be somewhere else. I never want to be, I know eventually I'll be in a comfortable place, having, all the comforts that we have in a place like Vancouver. But I think contrast is important in life. And so this kind of the difficulty and the kind of rise into the challenge on these journeys is kind of a really important part of my annual cycle, for sure. So yeah.
That's like some of the magnetic pull of Frank Wolf, though, because you actually, like, you live and breathe doing things you love, and you're generally a pretty content fella, right? And you got good energy and all that. But I think it's a really important point because, like, I'm a pretty simple dude too, most of the time. Oh, yeah. But pretty simple place, pretty simple life.
Yeah.
But I think it's a pretty important point that you've made, that you've kind of shunned all the other things that most people in society are addicted to chasing and doing and getting, and for whatever reason, often to kind of fill holes in themselves, right? So you don't chase that.
No,
you don't chase that game. You don't play that game. You're a simple dude. You do what you love. You do art. You work hard, and you're happy doing it. You're not happy with a big house or a big car or a $6,000 coat or whatever.
Yeah. Things have never, done it for me. I think, whatever I have, if I do like a, assessment of what I have, say, my wife and I, we kind of are in a 800 square foot condo in North Vancouver. We've been there for a while. It's everything we have. We don't have any extra storage beyond what we have in that place. It's just, I have my place with my basic gear. Anything that I'm not using, it's gone. So if it's not something that am I going to use this in the course of this next year? And if it's not, it's just gone. Because if I don't need it, I'll sell it. I'll give it away. It's extraneous. And just having stuff, like, it's almost like mental clutter. I mean, it's a classic kind of hoarder thing. I'm like, especially Shannon, especially, she's like the anti-hoarder. She has no emotional attachment to things. Christmas cards or birthday cards after Christmas, they're gone. Yeah, it's out of there. There's no collecting of anything, right? So, so I don't have a lot of sentimentality with things like that either. I think we both share that for sure. But if it's not functional and not something I'm actually using or need, then it almost builds up in my subconscious in a bad way. So it's, almost like clean, like this place too, right?
This place is empty.
Clean house.
It's great. Tight. I love it here.
I could see you have a very clean mental state by this.
And there's even here. There's even things in here that are going to get tossed in the next couple of weeks. And
so I appreciate the stark zenness of this space here.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I've worked hard on eliminate that. The sexiest thing to me is an empty drawer.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Hello, opportunity. But it's the same thing. It's the mental clarity.
It is.
And especially for writing or creating or any sort of thing. You can't do that if you have all this like physical junk bouncing around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right? Yeah. It has to be like, there's my family, we had this, like, for basically nothing in 1983, we bought this little pine cabin that was built in the 50s in Northern Ontario. I still spend a couple of months there a year, but it's where I do most of my effective writing. It's where I wrote most of this book. It's where I wrote, I have a book coming up too that I wrote there primarily. And it's basically, there's no Wi-Fi. There's one bar of shaky cell service. You might be able to get a text out, but there's nothing to distract you from the focus. And it's just a simple kind of pine cabin. It's like almost an organic place. I can look out over the water, and I can just kind of write, and I just get lost in it there because it's like this. It's like clean. There's not much to it. It's a simple little place. It's not a big, say, mansion on the water. It's just a little pine cabin on the water, and it's perfect. And I would never want anything more than that. I would never want to add anything to it or make it bigger or improve it. I just kind of keep it going as it is because it's all I need. So, and so something like that is just kind of perfect for, like I said, for writing, that kind of a simple space to kind of get lost in a creative activity. So,
Oh, I have a lot of questions. This is great. This is a very timely time for me. Like we were talking about before we hit record, like end of the year, and I'm thinking about what's up for myself, for my extracurricular hobbies, I guess, for myself for next year. But for you, like you're a writer, right? And I'm thinking about getting back to doing more writing. So for me, let me just, you can go coach mode on me right now. Because how do you balance, like you do a trip and you write about it, or you do an article, which is also writing, or you used to do more films, but not as much anymore. Like you create, a piece of content, whatever it is. Like how detached are you from the outcome of how many people read the article, or how many people buy the book? And then like there's a right answer to this. Like it's the joy of the writing and the creating and all of that. But are you, like, you don't do a trip to write about it and have something happen. You do a trip because you love being in the moment, and then you like writing about it because you like to relive the moment and perhaps organize some of the thoughts, the memories.
Yeah. Or Mike, I think writing, you're generally not reliving it. You're almost like, I guess you use the word meditation. You're almost meditating on looking at my journals, and I'll find a theme in there. Because if you're doing like an article, you basically have to marinate, let's say, a month-long trip into about 3,500 words. And so if you want to do that, you can kind of reflect on the whole journey I'll read my journals over before I write my article, and I'll find there's a theme. There's always a theme that arises from it. It could be like something like loss, or it could be something like time, or kind of theme. And then you can tie it all together with this theme into one article. And that's kind of where the creativity comes in. So after the fact, when you're on the trip, you don't really see this. You have to step back from it to see that. So that's the kind of the after the fact writing. But I mean, in terms of answering your question, as far as the why and this sort of thing, like if I was to do, like I always said when I did my films, my trips, if everything washed down the river, I would keep on doing the trip. I'm not doing the trip for the film. I'm doing the trip for the journey and that experience itself. The above all else, it's that 30-45 days of the journey, being lost in this world for that time, and that is the most important thing. And as part of that, I do enjoy writing, like a haiku a day that kind of is a quick 575 reflection on it, and then my journals about the day, and then you never know where it's going to go. There's no real end game, but it always, it's like if you, it's like Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. If you do this journey and plan it and do it, something magical always, every single time, comes out of that. And then with that, you can kind of create something interesting, be it a film or an article, or eventually a book, but it's not planned. It's almost like, and for me, like I never know what my next trip is except for my next trip. Or when I'm on the trip, I'm never thinking of a trip afterwards because I don't know what my next trip is. I don't have a whole bunch of trips lined up for the next bunch of years. It's like my cycle is, if I do like a journey, like I did a trip, 30 days, we kayaked around the Labrador Peninsula, 920 kilometers in June and July. And I didn't know what my next trip was going to be after that. I kind of give myself time and space to be open to opportunity. So sometimes you'll hear about something, or someone will approach you, or you'll read about something that kind of crystallizes something in your mind. And then I'll just follow off of my obscure kind of journey. And so, like, for example, after the trip, I didn't know what I was going to do, but now in March, I'm going down to Panama to do an 800 kilometer kayak trip from Panama City to Cartagena, Colombia, with a guy who I got to know at the Vancouver Mountain Film Fest. And he said, hey, he basically is cycling self-propelled from Squamish to Aconcagua, summiting every single peak self-propelled along the way. So he's in the highest peak in California, Oregon, Washington, Mexico, and now he's in Guatemala, and he's bagging these peaks all the way along. But you can't go through this thing called the Darien Gap. It's like a dangerous, roadless, kind of lawless area between Panama and Colombia. So he said, "Hey, do you want to paddle with me?" I said, "Sure." So I'm going to bring down 2 folding kayaks and we're going to do it. So, but that just kind of came out of the ether a couple months ago. So you just kind of leave yourself and you just kind of jump on the opportunity.
Well, I have a question about the lawlessness part. So, but that's not and when I think of that area down there, it's the critters too. But, I guess you got
crocodiles, snakes,
scorpions.
Yeah, we're going to be like sleeping in hammocks, like in mangrove forests and stuff like that. There's lots of human smuggling going on. There's cartels.
Yeah, not an issue, right? Not a worry.
Well, what can you do, right? You kind of put yourself in the opportunity and make the best of it. So you can't worry about all the possible any journey. You can't worry about all the possible downfalls, because then you'd never do anything, right?
Yeah.
And I always found no matter what journey you do, your mind is going to build up things way worse than they actually are when you're face to face with the reality. So the reality of it is never going to be as terrifying as what your mind will build up.
Which brings us to the story you just wrote, or the article you just wrote for, was it Explorer magazine?
Yes, Explorer, exactly.
With the polar bear?
That's right.
Okay,
That's right.
So I want to talk about that. I also want to talk about your solo kayak trip earlier this year. Was that up to Rupert? From
Rupert to Bella Bella.
Yeah. Okay.
Through the outer islands. Yeah.
And then I want to talk about the book that you have coming up. So let's go with the polar bear first, because I read that yesterday or this morning. And so you were doing polar bear guiding the last few months?
That's right. So in Churchill every year there's a basically October, November. Churchill is the only place you can reliably.
Churchill, Manitoba
is the only place in the world people can come and reliably see polar bears, because polar bears, they'll congregate around there, because the first place the ice comes in, and the polar bears need ice in order to hunt seals. So the polar bears all come up into Churchill area and hang out and wait for the ice to come in these kind of October, November time. And so we go out there in these big tundra buggies, or sometimes just in town, and we kind of let people hang out with polar bears and experience them. So
what? Yeah. So I've never seen a polar bear, and the part that you wrote about, it must have been, you weren't in the buggy, you guys were camping, and then
so it's completely different. So the guiding it's pretty cushy as far as it's people pay a lot of money to come up and see the polar bears. And they're staying in hotels or on this lodge in the tundra, and you're just kind of organizing them and kind of sharing your knowledge about polar bears with them when they see them. But for the trip around Labrador, this is probably the first time in 20 years this trip has been done. One reason is through Torngat National Park, it's very hard to get permits to go through solo, because there are lots of bears. Over 10% of the worldwide bear population is in that kind of general area, the Davis Strait subpopulation of bears. So there's one little town at the bottom of Ungava Bay called Kanjiksalujuk. Say that 10 times fast if you can even say it once. But starts there, this Inuit town, the bottom of Ungava Bay, and you go up around this Labrador Peninsula. So in the Quebec side, then down the coast of Labrador to a town called Nain. So it's 920 kilometers between the two towns. And it's open ocean, Labrador Sea. So you have to be a good paddler, first of all. And also because there's so many bears roaming around there, once the ice goes out, all the bears come onto land. And they're kind of in this kind of walking hibernation. So they're awake and they're moving slowly, but they're opportunistic as far as if there's food. And usually they're 100%, they eat seals. So when they're on the ice, all they care about is seals. You're not
45 seals a year?
45 seals a year is what they need to kind of, on average, these seals are these ringed seals. They're about 150 pounds. The bear
same ones that we have here, the cute guys with the faces?
No, these are the harbor seals. So they're like a little bigger than the harbor seals, but not too much bigger. But there's about 2 million of them in the Arctic, so it's a very stable source of food as long as there's ice. So, but once the ice goes out in, say, June, and they're on the land, and they'll kind of roam slowly on shore. If they see a whale carcass, they'll kind of get on that. Or if a seal happens to get caught in the intertidal zone, they'll get it too. But it's very hard for them to get seals without ice, because they can kind of just wait for the seal to come up to breathe and then grab them. But in this case, they're also, we're the only people camping on the Labrador Peninsula. So we were outside the park at this point, so south of Torngat National Park, and we'd seen a lot of bears, but never had any come into camp. We were kind of getting a little bit lax about our
Because you're kayaking and then you go to shore to sleep each night,
we're camping,
and 900K
and so
around.
we would have 4 of us on the trip, so we'd always have a person on bear watch. And so
is that like Baywatch in any?
Yeah, it's different, I think. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Bear watch, Baywatch. I guess if you did a bear watch in the bikini, it would be close. But in this case, literally, it's like from about 9 to 11, one person being watched, then 11 to 1, then 1 to 3, and 3 to 5. So 2 hours of watch for every person. You wake the next person up, they get up, and they'll just be alert in case a bear comes in, they can scare them away. So basically, through the park, we had to have our guns disabled because you're not allowed to have guns in the park, but we didn't have any problems in the park either. But then once we got past the park, in this one particular area, I was asleep. My tent mate Larry, we'd been asleep for about an hour. It's 10 o'clock at night, still bright outside. And then all of a sudden, I had my earplugs in, wearing I remember I have an eye mask. It says "Not tonight." It's like a satin eye mask that I got in I don't know where I got it from, but it works.
Kink.
And, yeah, exactly. Yeah, Kink store.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I just hear this, go away, this kind of screaming. And then Larry's going, there's a bear in the tent. There's a bear in camp. There's a bear in camp. And I'm suddenly you're awake. And we both pop up out of the tent, and it's time to see our trip partner, Justine. There's a bear right a foot from her, and she's hitting it with the chair she's sitting on. So she hits the bear in the face. And now JF, her partner, she's in the tent. She's sharing a tent with him just about 100 feet away. And then everyone's kind of up. The bear's kind of, she's screaming, go away, go away. And he's also shouting, and me and Larry a bit farther away. And then she managed to get a flare gun and fire it, and it kind of drives the bear towards our tent. So it literally in a split second, these bears can run 40 kilometers an hour. They're so fast. And in a split second, it was right in front of us, basically 30 feet away. And then Larry's got a shotgun out, but he's behind me, and I don't have to get behind Larry. I don't want a slug in my back. So I make the move to jump behind Larry. And with that movement, it's like a retreat movement, and the bear rushed us. And I was just standing there, just that split second before Larry reacted. I thought I just had sand around me, and this bear was, and it's just there's nothing I can do. This bear's going to take me down. But Larry, 27-year RCMP, he's totally cool and calm, just fired a shot over the bear's head, give the bear as much of a chance as possible. And the bear luckily turned around and then bolted away, and they were firing bear bangers and crackers just to scare it away. So that bear came in really close, right in on, and Justine, I talked to her about it afterwards, the interview, and she said, she looked around for 2 minutes, didn't see anything, sat down, and all of a sudden she just felt something, the hairs in the back of her neck stood up, and she looks over, and the bear is coming in right by the tent, just right in for her. And she only had time to react to pull the chair out and whack the bear. If she reached for the gun or the flare gun, it would have been on her. So she had to kind of just quickly, instinctively react. And that's kind of the bear was surprised, of course. It's not used to something giving that kind of resistance. And then definitely with polar bears, you want to be aggressive. You can't, that little retreat movement I did was the worst thing you wanted to do, but I also didn't want to get shot in the back. So I had to make a quick decision there. And it worked out. But so that's kind of the thing. We had to go right back to watch. After that, though, we brought the tents closer together. We put back up our alarm fence, which we had been using earlier. And then just kind of it was a good reminder to kind of be much more aware of these bears. Because literally, one thing about a polar bear is there's no growling, there's no sound. It's almost like it's not there. It's 1,000 pounds, and it's just floating. There's not even a sound, not even a footfall sound. They don't growl. They're just they're stealth. It was right there, and I didn't hear a thing ever. It was just this thing floating through camp, intent potentially in our destruction, right? They're just kind of predators. And one thing about polar bears are they don't really eat any plant matter. They're pure meat eaters, like grizzly bears, and black bears are mostly herbivores. Grizzlies are 50-50, vegetable, animal. And then where polar bears are pure, meat eaters. They're the largest apex predator on Earth. And to be face to face with that in that one moment, but I mean, Justine, I remember she said something after that. She said, even though the bear was right on top of her, she whacked with the bear, but she was also at the same time as this thing is probably bent on her destruction, she's observing how beautiful it was. And it was beautiful. It was like this beautiful, powerful creature, just kind of perfectly adapted to that environment and just in our midst. So you have this kind of, at one point you're scared, of course, but you're also in almost like an awe of this creature. So, and the fact that it didn't eat us, it was kind of a privilege and a good reminder. And so we're much more aware of things after that. But so these kind of seminal kind of experiences that happen on the journey, you don't necessarily want that to happen, but if they happen and it turns out okay, then it's kind of like you learn a lesson, and B, you have like something that's going to stay with you forever. So, but yeah, and then you go to bed because what else can you do, right? Yeah.
How well did you sleep that night?
Wasn't too. I mean, the bear was already gone, and we were much more kind of. The systems were more dialed, so I fell asleep because you're tired at the end of those days. So, but so it was and another time on that same trip, we also had a bear come in the water. We were paddling, and my instinct when I see a bear is to go towards it if I'm in my kayak to get closer for some little shots and stuff like that. Yeah. And so we'd seen bears, and usually they'll see us and they'll kind of do a little swim by and they'll just be on their way. But this one bear, only bear in the water, was a polar bear, came around the corner, was there, and then instead of like swimming away from us, it kind of swam towards us, and we're kind of like, okay, it's swimming towards us, getting closer, but not too worried. And then I thought eventually it's going to veer, but then it went, instead of having its head up, the head went like eyes only above the water, ears back, and coming right towards us. And I kind of went, oh, this is like, it's something they do when there's, say, if a seal is on an ice shelf. What they'll do is they'll kind of sneak in really stealth, and they'll dive down and then burst up on the ice shelf and grab the seal. And so it came in, about 30 feet away, and then it dove. And I said, Justine, let's get out of here, because it was going to pop up on our kayaks. And if it did that on you, you have no chance, right? So we just bolted out of there. So so those two kind of like aggressive moments with the polar bear were part of the experience. And you can see why a lot of people don't travel that coast. So it's hard to get the permits. You're putting yourself at risk because you're not allowed to have a gun in the park. And only people who can use guns in the park are Inuit. So usually people who go into Torngas National Park are with, say, a professional, guiding kind of outfit, and they'll be accompanied by an Inuit bear guard with a gun. So we had to kind of take care of ourselves, and it all worked out in the end. But yeah, so that's just one of these kind of, built-in risks you take if you're going into these kind of beautiful wild places. You're just part of the food chain. You're no longer top of the pecking order like we would be here in Vancouver. You're just part of the food chain and just a notch below polar bears.
It's got to be like when you see a whale, even if you're on the ferry or even if you're on shore or something. If you see a whale anywhere, like everyone just stops. Because they're so magical and they're so large, and you can't believe this creature, the entire ocean.
Mesmerizing, right?
It's mesmerizing. You stop and you take pictures, and then it's over. It's like this crisp moment. So I imagine it's something similar
for sure. Yeah. Anytime you're with wildlife, on their terms, in the same environment, sharing the same environment with you, it's always a kind of a special kind of moment, and it's always. When you're on these journeys, it's always very random. You never expect it. You hope to see these animals in their places. Sometimes for days you won't say anything. You said, where do they all go? But then all of a sudden, boom, they're right there in front of you, and you have a special interaction. So,
I saw this really gorgeous bird this morning over by Second Beach, Stanley Park. I'd never seen it before. Really long, very vibrant orange beak, black bird. I stopped and
oyster catcher.
Perhaps,
probably, yeah.
Perhaps
long orange beak.
Yeah. And a couple other people stopped too.
On the water.
Yeah. Then a crow came by and tried to peck on it and stuff. Right?
Oyster catchers. Yeah, they're really cool. Yeah.
Are they common around here?
You'll see them on the coast. Yeah, here I've seen them a lot around here, like out around like Bowen Island and stuff.
Right.
Kind of usually on kind of like kind of little rocky outcrops on the coast kind of thing. Yeah. So, but they're beautiful. They're cool looking birds for sure.
I've been spending less time in nature lately. And Max, you know Max, right? Max, my buddy, the German dude.
Oh yeah. I met Max. I remember Max now.
Were you on the trip? Were you guys on
Max?
Were you guys both on Discovery?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Me and Max were skiing together sometimes.
Yeah. But he He's in Kamloops. He's doing well. He's doing good. But he always
Excellent.
asks me like go in the mountains, like what are you doing this weekend? Like, oh, get it. I'm like, well, me and the honey are going for a walk like around the West End and stuff, and so, but
it's a bit definitely going the mountains. It's a lot of driving.
It's a lot of effort, right?
Yeah,
it's even more because you're on the North Shore, so it's a little bit more of a pull, especially these days. It's wild out there to drive anywhere in Vancouver on the weekend.
Yeah, like I live like a minute from the Old Buck Trailhead, so luckily I can just do a quick lap. I did just before coming here. I did a lap on my mountain bike just when I went down the trail, right? So it's I can get that release.
But you don't do like we don't do the same hut trips we used to do, and I don't ski Whistler Blackcomb anymore.
I mean skiing for me, like over time, like I'd say for hut trips and skiing, I guess the cost benefit analysis of the effort around it. Most of the skiing I've been doing has been like Arctic kind of ski tours and stuff like that. But I think also after you've done something a lot year after year after year, like I did probably 10 trips to Trophy Hut and Discovery Hut, it kind of becomes a little bit, it's still a good time, but it just, things get a little repetitive and I look for something, just different.
Hence the lines on the map.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of moving around.
Your update that you wrote about last week, it's like you're always putting new lines on the map. So how now, like I love the BC coast as much as I like perhaps a little bit more dainty now in my days, right?
Well, your work involves the BC coast too.
Well,
right?
it also involves some other coasts around the world that are gorgeous, but perhaps don't have the same environmental regulations. But we'll leave that for the post beer chat here.
Yeah.
But your trip paddling earlier this year, and you've spent some time on the BC remote west coast for a few trips, right?
I think I've done over the last I've circumnavigated Haida Gwaii, circumnavigated Vancouver Island, and also done the Inside Passage.
So if you're listening to the podcast, pull out a map and look at how like that's thousands of kilometers of kayaking.
Yeah.
If that's your...
I've explored much of the BC coast on these kind of those 3 journeys, and then the one I did this past summer solo, or this spring solo, was from Prince Rupert, which is just below the Alaska Panhandle, and then travel 400 kilometers through kind of the outer islands of the North Coast. So there's the Inside Passage, which is where if someone was to take the ferry or the Alaskan cruise, it kind of goes up this kind of protected inner passage that ends up in Prince Rupert and beyond to Alaska. And I've done that by kayak, but this one I wanted to check out the outer islands, which are not visited that often, especially in May. Like you won't see anyone. So I did a trip from there out to like Banks Island, and then down through Price and Campania, and then Price, and eventually back to a little town called Bella Bella. And I did it in a very simple kind of way. I had a little folding kayak, so a track it's called, and then just kind of hop on the plane in Vancouver, fly up to Prince Rupert, deploy the kayak, go shopping at the local grocery store for food, then head off for 400 kilometers, and then end up back in Bella Bella, pack up the kayak, hop back in the plane, back in Vancouver. So
how long was that trip?
It was 2 weeks. So 14 days, 400K. And then, so I kind of just a quick little jaunt down the coast. And it was all for me. I've not done any real significant solo journeys. Like on my day-to-day, I do a lot of solo mountain biking and paddling and this sort of thing. But usually on my long journeys, I like to have someone to kind of share the experience with, as well as kind of, it's good to be motivated by somebody else. In a canoe, you're going to move more quickly and more efficiently with someone else in the canoe, 2 people in canoe. And the kayak trips I've done before, like Dave Beresford, who's a guy who I worked with at Mountain Equipment Co-op for years, good friend of mine. We did the Inside Passage in 2020. We basically in COVID lockdown in May, there was nowhere else to go, nothing else to do, except escape out your back door. So we went off on a month-long trip to Prince Rupert from Squamish. And so
naturally,
and then our friend Amber joined us. The next year we went around Vancouver, went from West Vancouver, paddled around Vancouver Island, back to West Vancouver.
From West Vancouver,
we started from
like in a kayak,
White Cliff.
Oh yeah.
So and then we crossed over up through kind of Surge Narrows, crossed up to Johnson Strait, came around, and then we crossed back over from basically Parksville across the Lasqueti, and then Thornby Sunshine Coast to come back. So, but so usually that's always been with other people. But this one I wanted to do.
How was this one? And because you're sleeping again in a tent on the rocky shore, and whatever creatures are in the forest.
Yes, yeah, but beautiful. I mean, gorgeous.
It's so gorgeous.
It is. It's beautiful, and so like in May, it's a quiet time of year too. Like there's nobody out there. I didn't see anyone once I left Prince Rupert. I remember being in Prince Rupert, and I wrote about this. I'm doing an article for Mountain Life right now about that journey, with a bunch of photos, kind of like a photo essay kind of thing. But like right away, when you the hardest part about a journey is getting to that first paddle stroke. So you're kind of like, finally you're at the boat launch in Prince Rupert. I'm getting myself organized. I'm putting together this folding kayak and just want to get it going. And, there's boats going in and out. And you're kind of just want to get and it's like, it's 3:00 in the afternoon. I've got to get out there at least 20 kilometers to my first camp. So it's going to be, and then right away I see this guy drift into the parking lot. And he's like, you can see, he's like, oh no, this guy's going to come. And he basically is like, a tweaker, totally like a guy who was a bit of a methamphetamine aficionado, I'm pretty darn sure. And he comes in, he's got like a dirty life jacket clipped to his arm, and then he's shirtless. And right away, he just sees me and just kind of locks in. He comes right in and said, oh God, I got to talk to this guy now. He's going to, it'd be hard to shake him. And right away, he's going to go, I'm from the future. I own this place in the future. You're lucky you can stay here. This is my place. You're lucky I'll let you set it up, but I own this place in the future. And I said, sure you do. But he just kind of went on and on. Then he offers me some meth. I said, no, I'm good, man. And he offers me a wife to take with me on my trip. I said, no, I'm good. Actually, I want to go on this thing solo. He said, no, that's dangerous. And then he tries to give me his life jacket off his arm. And so it goes on and on. Eventually, we almost come to blows. And I kind of, finally I shake him off. I was like, it just kind of reminded, okay, I'm really glad I'm going to be solo, get away from kind of the madness of humanity for a couple of days to kind of recrystallize that in my mind. And then finally, once I got in the water, first paddle stroke, you just kind of instantly free of it all. And you're just on the journey. And then it's just like, everything's good. And then, and so that was it. And it's, I think there's so many things to do. You're navigating, you're looking for camp. I just felt completely so comfortable and so in the kind of the almost like the I guess the loving womb of Mother Nature the whole time. That kind of environment is just so, there's nothing scary to me in it. It's all just like, because I've done a lot of traveling on the coast, it's just so, these huge, cedar trees that are just, soaring above you, your camp beneath them, these perfect white beaches with like wolf tracks all over them, whales breaching as you're kind of like paddling along into like a headwind kind of gale. And you get to camp and there's, you're in this kind of protected little nook. It's just like howling out there in the strait, but you're in this like nice little place and you're kind of sitting by a fire and just kind of listening to the water running through the forest and the birds and the trees. And it's just kind of like, it's just like a very satisfying place to be. And you can kind of, journal and write, but then you're just occupied with everything, setting up camp and kind of being in the environment. And the next day, you don't know what's around the next corner. And you just kind of, I realized you don't really need it. I definitely like traveling with people, but I'll definitely do another solo trip after that. It was such a there's no one else to distract you from what's around you. You're even more into it than if you're with someone else, because it's just you with your thoughts and yourself. And I guess that you also know that you really, know yourself and you like yourself and you enjoy spending time with yourself, which is important. I think if you are always distracting yourself with things and not being with yourself, I think you'll find out in the wilderness whether that's the case, right? There's nowhere to run and hide from yourself out there. So, it's really enjoyable. It was just a fully fulfilling experience. And it is an absolute sense of freedom when every decision you make, whether right or wrong, it's on you. And that is, that's the best way to be. There's nowhere to lay the blame or shirk or, blame another person on the trip or think ill of anyone else, because it's just you and you can't get away from yourself. And if you enjoy that experience, then I think you're in a good place in life, probably. So. Yeah.
That's very beautiful.
So, yeah.
It's because you feel very whole and complete because
Yeah.
you feel whole and complete with yourself, and you're connected to nature, and you're out there. But I think a lot of people perhaps felt uncomfortable being alone with themselves during the pandemic at certain times, because it's that certain thing. Like it is a big step to kind of be happy with yourself and be content with yourself and not need any sort of show or any sort of other validation. Like nobody knew what you accomplished for those 2 weeks when you were on. Like nobody really cared, right? Like some of us that were aware of that were like, yeah, we hope he's okay. I'm pretty sure he's okay. But nobody cared that you paddled or where you camped or whatever.
No, it's irrelevant to everyone else. If you basically, these journeys, no matter if it's by yourself or with someone else, you 100% have to do it just for yourself and no one else. I mean, not in a selfish kind of way, but just do it, for its own sake and for the journey itself, and you don't need validation from anywhere outside of that experience. That experience is your validation, right? It doesn't matter anything else. Like no matter what happens, if no one ever hears about it ever, it doesn't matter. You've still done it. You've still experienced it. And the validation is the experience, right? And that's as simple as that. So yeah.
You must have had some chuckles though, like throughout the trip about that experience with the guy at the boat launch. Because it's always, if you're on like group trips or something, and it's kind of like that last thing that happens before you leave civilization, you got something to talk about.
I wrote in like
that. You must have wrote in quite detail.
I have the whole I've got a book coming out in 2024, but in 2025 I have kind of a Lines on the Map Part 2.
Cool.
And I wrote about a 6,000 word, pretty in-depth write-up on that solo journey.
Nice.
And it opens with a very detailed back and forth conversation with this guy. And then I would occasionally reflect on him. It's almost like, I think oftentimes like starting off in trip, you'll see someone in a town or whatever, have a funny interaction with them. And I'll always, like, if I'm on a canoe trip with a partner, I'll always say, I wonder what Jerry from Sandy Bay is doing right now. We'll just kind of talk about what Jerry's probably doing. We'll make up a life for Jerry and what Jerry might be doing. So the last person you kind of actually see, because you don't see many people, you always talk about, you start to make up their life just to entertain yourself on trips. So, but because you meet so few people, these people become, they're the most recent interaction you've had, and that is something you kind of work through your brain on journey. It's like on trip is a great place to kind of like, reflect, and of course you can reflect on the most recent interaction you've had. So, so that's kind of part of the fun. You can kind of play. You can make up. This person could be anyone or anything. You'll never see them again, but you can make up whole stories about these people.
Is it the best writers that are most present and can reflect and be as most aware of instances like that, like the guy at the dock, and if you're fully present and you're observing this whole situation and it's going sideways, you don't have to remember what's going on, because you're going to be able to remember it when you come back. But if you're fully curious about what's going on, like, to me, that is very fun. Like I can write about for pages and pages about experiences that have happened in the last 24 hours.
Absolutely.
And that can be interesting to me, I guess. And that's good enough and it's fun. But it's that process of that meditative process of, sitting down and writing for an hour or two of letting it all come out. But that's so fun.
It is.
You find that fun?
I do. It's very, it's like when people read my articles and explore, they kind of read it, here's an adventure article. But mostly it ends up being an article about, it's a reflection on humanity that's relatable. It has to be relatable to people in their day-to-day lives. So people can relate to, you see a tweaker or a junkie, whatever, in the context, you bump into someone in Vancouver, and often it is an interesting interaction. They're different people. I mean, they have their issues, but they're also, in their own way, they're extremely, out of the box and interesting because of their nature. They're not living as society wants you to live. And these are all interesting people. And so putting that in the context of a wilderness journey, people can still relate to that experience, right? So ultimately people can relate to people. So to have this human aspect into any kind of writing, even if you're writing about the wilderness, is always more interesting to your reader, right? You can't alienate your reader by putting yourself on a pedestal and saying this is amazing and you'll never understand what a great experience it is.
It's a boring article. Like, I paddled 900 kilometers and I did this many this day.
The article is just window dressing to a human story. It's just something that is a different way to approach, what say you would write about the person you met on the bus going to work on Monday or whatever, right? So it's just a different way of approaching it. It's a different way to formulate a story that's been told again and again, and people just want to, these are stories that are universal, and I think you're just kind of presenting it from a different aspect. So
cool, sweet.
Yeah.
What's the book coming out in 2024?
In 2024, so coming out in May in a few months with Rocky Mountain Books, same publisher that did Lines on a Map. And the name of the book is called Two Springs, One Summer, and it's basically a kind of a very intimate, in-depth look at my year 2018 when I did kind of 3 major expeditions within about 11 months. So 2 of them were spring ski trips, the 2 springs, and then the summer was a big giant canoe trip. And kind of weaving all 3 of those journeys together. So it's kind of like my life and my perspectives on these journeys, but also the life in between. What I'm doing here in my day-to-day, my kind of in between reset time in Vancouver with people here, kind of my thoughts. It's a little bit of a memoir as well in some ways. So through the course of that 2018, I also reflect on other parts of my life, past and present, future kind of thing too. So just kind of a more interesting writing space. I'm so used to doing these kind of 3,500, 5,000 word kind of magazine articles, which is a different way of writing. Here I had the freedom to really explore in depth, my journeys, the people I did the trips with. It was with 3 different teams of people. All I had different kind of interpersonal kind of interactions with throughout, some better than others, which is like in life. And then in between, I have struggles as well. Like for me, my struggle, you can imagine if you have your ideal self on journey and you have a less than ideal self in between, it's almost like the struggle of, well, what am I doing here? But then you have to realize this is just kind of the reset and the perspective you need to get to the next journey. And it's just as important and just as valuable and just as good in its own way. And so, just kind of coming to that kind of realization through that kind of cycle. So it's just kind of bringing people intimately into my life, being kind of this expedition explorer kind of person, and kind of the pros and the cons of that kind of life. Nothing is a fairy tale. So yeah.
So it's a part of it is you coming to peace at the terms at the times when you're kind of in between trip.
Yeah.
There's a quote I read last week, Maya Angelou. If you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude.
Totally. Yeah. Even on the trip, like I'd say, of those, there's a lot of me reflecting and on trips. Sometimes you're in this kind of. I do like to. I'm not just like casually paddling along. I put in like my rhythm on trip is I put in, especially on a canoe trip, 10 hours a day, every day. No rest days. You just go into rhythm. And sometimes if you're going upstream, you'll get maybe 5 kilometers.
How do you paddle upstream?
You just paddle really hard up the eddies, and you hop out and drag and push and pull and line.
Glamorous.
And portage around through the bush around waterfalls. And so you're kind of grinding, and you're in the rocks and you're banging your feet and legs on that. So it's hard work. And it's almost like, but it's always big picture. So in the course of a long journey, if you're going upstream, downstream, big lakes, I always end up doing about 40 or 45 kilometers a day on a canoe trip. And I just know that. So you have to just trust the process. But in the course of that, it's obviously it's stressful and it's hard. And the person that's with you isn't always going to be on the same page as you. And so I kind of share that, my perspectives, and I'll be critical in one day of this person, but then eventually I'll realize that, I'm being critical and this person has given me the gift of accompanying me on this journey. They're taking this time out of their life to be on this journey, which I've concocted. And you lose perspective of that sometimes. It's almost like you have this kind of tunnel vision and focus that kind of, and you kind of put your negativity and anger into the person with you on trip sometimes, right? But sometimes it's like the opposite. This is the most beautiful person you've ever spent time with in your life, kind of thing. So it kind of goes back and forth. But so that's part of the whole, very open about it. I totally don't sugarcoat it. I look like a bad person on the trip sometimes. I'm critical of my partners sometimes, but I also realize in the end, that I'm being critical and I'm being unfair. But in the moment, you sometimes don't realize that.
Do you run these parts by the person you're writing about before you publish them?
No.
Oh, really?
You can't.
What do you mean?
If you
Are they going to think you're kind of a dickhead when they read this?
No, I don't think so. And I think if you're a writer, you have to write from your own perspective. If you're honest and have taken a beat, and I've taken years since that 2018 to eventually I wrote it, I put the book away, said it's not going to work, and I came back to it, and through refining and going over it again and again, you eventually marinate it down to the reality of the whole situation, right? So you kind of take out a lot of the stuff you think is good, and kind of you trim it down and clean it up. But I think it's almost like you can't run your writing through a whole bunch of too many people, I think, in some ways, because then someone's always going to have an opinion of it. And essentially it's got to be something that's true to your heart and to your writing. And you can hopefully trust yourself in terms of being a person with perspective, that you're going to be fair to everyone involved, yourself and whoever you're with, kind of thing. So it's definitely not, but I think the worst kind of writing is where you're trying to be nice to everyone. You've got to be honest as well, right? So, and I don't think anyone's going to be, I don't think anyone that I know would be offended by what I write. So hopefully, but if they are, then they are, right? That's life. So
it's truthful writing.
Nothing is malicious. Everything is very, I think, measured as far as, and I'm as hard on myself as I am on my partners, kind of thing, right? So, and that all kind of comes out in the narrative.
What is your writing process? Do you journal on trips and you come back to North Van? Do you like have a couple hours during the day in front of a laptop, or do you write it more by hand when you get home, or
I'll just kind of like for Explorer, who I've done like probably 15 features for now, usually about 3,500, 4,000 word articles. And usually I have a theme in my mind too. So I'll kind of have that theme or a few possible themes, then I'll try to link it together and I'll just start writing. And then, but kind of there's always like certain moments that rise from the ether of a journey that are kind of the signature seminal moments, and those all get put in there and connected together, right? Cool. So it's kind of trying to keep it fast paced, keep it interesting, move along the narrative, and keep but also have a point to the whole thing too.
That latest article was a thumper. Going, right? That's fun when you hit that beat. It goes,
exactly. Goes. And you know it when you have it. You kind of, when you're writing, it's like, if it's flat to you, it's going to be flat to everyone else. So it's got to pop and be interesting to yourself as a writer.
How's the body holding that?
Well, I can't run anymore, so my knees are shot. Definitely, because I basically have years and years of mountain running out here in the North Shore. It used to be my kind of easy kind of mental escape release, and I replaced it complete with mountain biking, which is good. I can mountain bike and I can ski and stuff like that. But the downhill running in particular, I've got like bone on bone, both knees. So kind of patella on femur. So, in the next decade, I'll probably have to have a couple of knee replacements, but everything else is good physically. So I can still canoe trip. I can still ski. I can still bike. I just can't run anymore. So that's kind of been taken out of me. Otherwise, the rest of the body is pretty good. So
cool. Do you lift weights?
No.
Yeah. I've started.
Yeah. Have you?
Because running hurts me too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think running is such a great activity for the mind, but it's terrible for the body over time. It just pounds it out. Right. So, and a lot of people I know, because I ran competitively since I was like in grade 4. I was like a scholarship athlete at the University of Michigan. I ran there for a couple of years. I won the knee knacker, which is a race across the North Shore, 50 kilometers. And now my knees are knackered. So it was prophetic, I guess. But so I used to run all the time. As it was an easy kind of, just again, it's a simplicity thing. Pair of running shoes and off you go.
Yeah.
That's why I loved running. It's just whereas mountain biking, it can be aggravating sometimes because bikes break and they're expensive, and there's always, if you break a part of a bike, you're not riding. So it's always this fiddly part of mountain biking I don't like.
Yeah.
So
and your mind can't quite escape the same, right? You really got to pay attention.
Yeah, you don't. I think almost you can't think. It's like skiing. Mm-hmm. If you're skiing downhill and skiing through the trees, you're just kind of flowing, right?
You're paying attention.
Yeah. And mountain bike, you're just there. Yeah. In the act, you can't drift away and think about what I'm going to have for lunch.
Yeah.
If you're going,
not doing any writing when you're on the mountain bike.
No. It's on the uphill you can. So when you're going uphill, you can kind of, you're just kind of in that meditative grind. It's like, doing a skin track up, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of thing. But then on the way down, you have to you're just kind of like in the activity.
I do a lot of walking, like a lot.
Yeah. I don't do enough, because mountain biking is so easy for me when I'm here.
Where
I
you
do a lot
are.
of that.
Yeah,
but Shannon and I will walk a lot. We can walk, everywhere down to Deep Cove and everywhere around, and just back in the forest, the trails and that sort of thing. So that's still great for sure too. So, and skate skiing, cross country skiing is a quick little hit too locally. But
do you ski up up Seymour Road like Kevin does?
I don't know. Kevin does that. He does roller skiing, exactly.
So up Seymour.
Yeah, he goes up, and then he'll
hike down.
He'll come down one of the trails.
Yeah.
He'll go up like to CBC and come down CBC Trail and down that way. So, and that's roller skiing, and that's great cross training because that's his main sport probably in wintertime.
Yeah,
he's cross country skiing all the time, right? And he's also getting ready for go to Ellesmere, which is a combination of dog sledding and skiing when he goes there, right? So so he's got the preparation.
That's an intense journey.
Yeah,
right.
I think they tried to do it with skiing and it didn't work out for them a couple of years ago.
Well, if you listen to episode 12, you'll hear all about it.
Yeah. I know. Kevin's told me about it in depth, and then, but now it's going to be much more of a cultural odyssey.
Yeah.
So, which is more interesting, I think, as far as like, story for sure. So, I think it'll be a great trip. So,
we'll wind her to a close here soon.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, what trips you got coming up in next year?
I have the trip that I talked about, Darien Gap, right? I mentioned that already. The Panama.
Yes.
Yeah. So that one, and then and depending, I'm not sure because it's gonna. I know a couple of friends of mine, Dave and Johnny, who I write about in the book, because we did a trip across Baffin Island. The 3 trips I talk about in that book, by the way, in the 2 Springs One Summer, is we skied from Kikik-Tarjuak up over the Penny Ice Cap, which is about 6,000 feet high, and then across Baffin Island, ended up a town called Pangnirtung. So that's the first trip. The next trip is Yellowknife, 1,750 kilometers across the Northwest Territories, and Nunavut to Chantry Inlet. And then the last one was a trip following the footsteps of John Ray, who's a famous explorer who discovered the demise of the Franklin expedition. They found out they'd all died on that expedition. So that was his so we kind of retraced that. So those are the 3 trips I did then. So Johnny and Dave wanted to do a trip in Clyde River in like May, but I think my trip in Panama and Cartagena was going to run into that. So I'll probably then end up doing a big canoe trip, either a big one in Yukon Northwest Territories or else in Nunavut, some Yellowknife up into the Northwest Passage via a different route I haven't been to before. So a big northern canoe trip, and then the kayak trip are the probably 2 main ones.
Lots to explore.
Yeah, endless. A lifetime's worth. Yes.
Well, on that note, so end of the year, like how do you get reflective at all at the end of the year? Do you kind of look back at your year and kind of and think about the year coming up and your trips that are coming up, and think about it in terms of a lifetime, and there's one less year in your life remaining now, or you just like, whatever, dude? And
I don't think about it too much. I think even my trips, once I'm done like a big trip, I'm basically on to the next whatever. Once the journey is over, it's over. There's no more, the journey is done. The main essence and experience that I was has basically passed me by, and I still have some articles to write, or in the past I've done films on it and edited those, but I pretty quickly just knock off an article and move on. So I don't reflect too much on it, because I always know that if you're passionate and you're curious, there's going to be another one on the horizon pretty quickly.
Nice.
You don't need to just kind of rest on any laurel. You're on to the next one, right? So,
and who knows, maybe in 5 years, like, you become passionate and curious about something completely opposite from nature.
It could be, and
wilderness.
And I always mix, nature and art and that sort of thing. But and I've done traveling, in Europe and stuff like that too. And it's good and it's nice, but it's not really me like the wilderness is. So I think a friend of mine, Pearson Ross, he's a musician, but we talked about this thing, trip foo. And trip fu basically means it's kind of a canoe trip term, but more like it's the Zen things that no matter where you are in life, it could be in a city, it could be in the country, you're on trip. So if you can get that canoe tripping mindset for your entire life, then you've found tripvana or nirvana, as they say. So, but it's just another version of kind of living a present kind of life, no matter where you are. Right?
One meditative moment to the next without actual meditation.
Exactly. You're always in that canoe, just kind of
the canoe of life.
The canoe of life, baby.
The canoe of life with Frank.
That's the next book.
that's. I may take that. Whoever gets it. I would probably have to do more canoeing.
You said it first. You can take it. It's just a metaphor. You don't have to actually have a canoe. So yeah,
I like canoes. Either way. But I would have to say, one of the biggest influences you had on me, coming full circle back to our first ski trips and things like that, has been the love of the cold.
Yeah,
the cold plunge, the Wim Hof. You taught me about Wim Hof,
yes,
right?
Yes.
You did teach me Wim Hof before.
The slow snow roll around the cabin, right?
and then into the sauna. I was at a very bougie wilderness experience last night. Circle Wellness down on Granville Island.
Okay.
You heard of this thing? It's this. It's by the Granville Island Hotel, and you go in there and you get your own cedar. Total free plug to them, but they deserve it. This place is great.
Awesome.
Cedar hot tub, not like tubber, cedar hot bath type thing. Yeah. Cold plunge that is actually cold.
Yeah.
And then they have this wellness pod room, and it's like Himalayan salt walls, and it's heated floor, and it's 50 Celsius, so it's not like raging hot sauna. Yeah. But it's the music is perfect.
Yeah.
And it's timed with the lights on the wall, and it slowly gets darker and darker, and the music crescendos up more and more.
Yeah.
And then it's dark for about 10 or like dark.
Yeah.
Like you can't tell if your eyes are open or closed dark. And that usually freaks me out quite a bit. But the music is all going with this. And all of a sudden this light slowly starts to appear on the ceiling. So it was when you're talking about moments and experience is
that on all the time? Like,
it's there.
Can do it?
Yeah, anyone can do it. It's this must have been someone must have canceled, because usually it's booked for the whole month,
right?
And they release at the beginning of the month,
the openings
bookings,
or whatever. Yeah.
And usually you can go many mornings at 6:30, but this was a Saturday night, so I saw it on Friday. I'm like,
and what's this place called?
It's called Circle Wellness.
Circle Wellness.
Check it out. Free plug, but whatever. You guys rocked it. Maybe free trial, whatever.
Give another one. Yeah.
But the cold tank was delicious.
Awesome. Yeah. No, I love the cold. It's like I love like bitter, sour, spicy, cold, just kind of things that really make your senses pop, right?
That's it.
Yeah. So
where can we find you in 2024? How do we want to know about when the book's coming out? We want to know how to track trips. Where's the best way to find you?
I'll put on the Instagram at FrankWolf70. You can check me out there. And if you put up Frank Wolf Explorer, you can read all my online kind of blog, the regular blog I have there as well, which also alludes to some of my features as well. Sweet. So 2 Springs, 1 Summer will be out in May.
Cool.
2024. So
we'll be there.
Yes.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, Mike.
Good to catch up.
Good to catch up with you.
Always inspired.
Yes, indeed.
I feel a little bit more of a pull to nature, and definitely writing for next year. So thank you for that.
Yes, of course. Writing is great.
All right. Thanks.